Hi there, my name's Bruce Rain from Brankus Creations, and today I'm going to be recapping a Macintosh SE 30. Just a quick reminder to please subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to click on the bell if you want to receive notifications. So I've actually done recapping videos before, but the Macintosh SE 30 is an incredibly popular compact Mac, so I thought it probably deserved its own recapping video. Now, if you want to know more of the details about what recapping is or why it needs to be done, in my other recapping tutorial I go into a fair bit of detail. The summary is this: electrolytic capacitors have a limited lifespan, and computers like this that are about 30 years old have reached the end of that lifespan. And in particular, these surface mount electrolytic capacitors, they have a tendency to leak. And so the capacitor itself is no longer effective, but the electrolyte that leaks out can also damage surrounding components. So it's really, really important with these computers that they get recapped in order to keep them working. If you have one of these, if you've got a Macintosh SE 30 or a computer of a similar vintage that has these surface mount electrolytic capacitors and you haven't had it recapped, get it done, because they will have leaked by now. If you're in Australia, you can send it to me and I can recap it. If you're somewhere else in the world, jump onto one of the forums or one of the Facebook groups, ask for a recommendation. There are people doing recapping everywhere. Now, looking at this particular Macintosh SE 30 board, it's really not in particularly bad condition. It does definitely have capacitor leakage, but it hasn't caused some of the corrosion damage that I sometimes see on these. This one here was quite dusty when I got it, but apart from that, it's really not too bad. In this area up here, where we have a little group of 4 electrolytic capacitors together, there's actually 5 if we include this little guy down here, there's a definite greasiness, sort of oiliness around it, which is very typical of capacitor leakage. And in actual fact, as I say, this was a very dusty board and the dust is all stuck onto there. So a very clear indication that the capacitors in this have leaked. Now, as I said in my previous one of the best things to do is to take a photo of the board and write down all of the ratings of the capacitors, so that when you take them all off, you know where they go. But I have actually got floating around here somewhere a cheat sheet, which I will put up. I'll put up a link to with this video. And this is basically just a photo of an SE30 board with all the different capacitors, their ratings, where they go, their polarities. And so when I take these all off, I can then just use this to follow where all the new ones go. So, all right, well, I think the first thing to do is to jump across onto the microscope, and we'll go and have a close-up look at this and just see what the condition is like up close. Okay, so having a look at this little cluster of 4 capacitors here that I was referring to before, you can see there's this kind of greasiness around here. And in actual fact, it looks like we might even have some trace damage. I should mention that this particular computer, although it does work, it has no sound. And that's very typical of these, being the first sign of capacitor failure is when they have no sound. And that's because just over here are the sound chips, and just over here are these leaky capacitors, and so it's not a particularly good combo. Now, if you just have a look here, I'm just going to zoom in, see how this trace is black and the others are green. That's a sign of there being corrosion underneath that coating. Now, that can just sometimes be a bit of black that you can scrape off, or sometimes it's eaten right through that trace and needs to be replaced. But we'll find that out once we get these capacitors off. So we've got that one there. Down the bottom here, I notice that this one here is kind of bent upwards. Now, that I don't know whether that's caused from some swelling or whether it's just been bumped, but this is sort of pointing at a slight angle and it shouldn't be. And then we've got one down here. Again, you can see how all this dust is stuck to the board, and it's stuck because it's got all this greasy electrolyte that's leaked out. And once again, we can see here we've got more of this kind of blackening going on along the trace here. Now, obviously, the longer these things are left, the worse they're going to get. So, as I said before, if you've got one of these that hasn't been recapped, get it done. And then we've got one here. Doesn't look too bad around there. And then we've got three just sitting here right next to the plastic. And of course, that's a bit of a challenge because we're going to be applying heat and we don't want to melt this plastic, but I've got a few little tricks to get around that. So, first thing I'm going to do is get all these capacitors off. I should also mention that we have here a couple of axial electrolytic capacitors, one here and one here. I'm going to replace them as well. They generally don't fail, but if I'm going to all the trouble of replacing these capacitors, I may as well replace those two as well. So, now, I have talked about this in my previous video, and that is when I'm removing these capacitors, I do them with hot air. Now, there is this video floating around at the moment of someone grabbing a pair of pliers and squeezing the top of these capacitors and twisting them to remove them. Now, the person in that video does make a very clear disclaimer that if you're dealing with an old computer, it's not the best thing to do. And with these, and in actual fact, I would never, ever do that. I always remove these with a hot air station. So I just wanted to mention that if you had seen that video and you're thinking, oh, I'm going to recap my SE30 and just twist these off, with a computer of this age, you are pretty much guaranteed to take every single pad off the board during the removal of the caps because these have got quite brittle with age. So as I say, I use a hot air station, but when I use a hot air station, I like to shield the heat. I like to make it so that I'm only applying that heat to the component I'm removing and to none of the other components. Even a lot of those components can withstand the heat without any trouble. A lot of the time the solder has developed a bit of a crust over the top of it with age. And when you apply the heat, that crust stays crusty, but the solder underneath it melts and it starts pushing little solder beads through that crust, and you can then end up with little fine solder beads all over the board, which is obviously not a good idea if they get stuck in the wrong place. So, as I say, I generally, as much as possible, try and protect the heat from hitting anything else. And the way I do that is by using these box cutter blades. So they're basically just blades like this that you would use in a sort of a box cutter. And they can just be snapped to any length you want. This one, as you can see, is a little bit rusty because it's been used here a fair bit. But these are really good at absorbing heat, and so you can just sort of put these in between the hot air and whatever it is that you're going to be removing. So what I also use is little springs like this. So I have like I bought a little box of springs that had lots of different types of spring, and this particular spring works really well to then just hook over the top of this, and that allows me to then just stand it up. So I can go in and build little sections like that on the board so that when I apply hot air, I'm only applying it to where I want. So I'll just have an example here. The first thing I'm going to do is remove these four capacitors here. And so what I would look at doing is I would get a few of these. I'd put maybe one there like that, and I put maybe one along there like that. And as you can see, I'm creating this little sectioned off area where I'm protecting the computer from the rest of the computer from heat. I'll get another spring here. I'll plonk wrong way around, that way around, and I'll put that there like that. And here you see I've created this nice little channel where I can just run some heat in that direction, and it's only going to hit those capacitors. So let's get started. I'm going to start applying heat now to this. Now, as I mentioned in my earlier recapping video, once you start getting the board warm, it's a lot easier to then remove the next capacitor. So what I do with a group of four like this, I'm going to remove them all in one go. And as I apply heat, I'm getting that incredibly strong fishy smell that you get from the electrolyte leakage on the board. It's kind of gross, There we go, there's one. Off he comes. And here's another one. You may notice that on these SE30s, there's no writing on the top of the capacitors. That's because these ones have actually got little wraparound plastic labels that have the information about the capacitor. That's what this yellow funk is that I'm getting stuck on my tweezers as I go to remove these. And last one. There we go. You can see that little bead there. That's what I was referring to before about how the they get a crust on the top of the solder, and then as you melt it, the little beads start to pop through like that. So that's squeezed its way out from underneath this little mound of solder there. Okay, so that's the first 4 removed. In the same area on this one, we have one more little capacitor just here. So once again, I'm going to build my little wall. All of these chips along in a line here, these are all related to the video. So often you can end up with video issues related to the capacitor leakage. And once again, I want to protect these as much as possible. So I'm going to get my little guy there, and then I'll get another one on the other side, like that. And there's only a crystal on the other side of that, a little oscillator, so I don't mind if he gets a little bit of heat. He won't mind. Alright, so we've got a nice little heat channel along here, so I'm just going to run that heat down the middle. And you can see it bulging up quite quickly. Won't take much to get this one off, I don't think. Oh, come on. Come off. I'm certainly doing a great job at melting the label on the outside. Come on. You just have to be really, really careful with these ones, because these, I don't want to apply any unnecessary pressure, because I'll just tear a pad, and I don't want to do that. I'm going to actually just move this and just blow right down here. I'm having trouble coming in at an angle. There we go, off he comes. Okay, so that's one more. Then we've got, I'm going to leave the little row of 3 until last. So I've got one more here, and this one's right next to the processor direct slot, the plastic processor direct slot. So once again, we need to have reasonable shielding around that one so that we don't melt the plastic. I don't like sending anyone's computer back with melted plastic. So I've got our little channel. Let's get that in the middle of the screen there. My field of view is slightly larger than what gets captured by this camera, so there are times where I'm sort of looking at something and then I look up at the screen and realise that it's not being captured on video, and then I have to just sort of move it around. So just letting you know. Okay, come on, getting some heat, There we go, I can see that solder starting to melt now. And I can see all of this funky stuff getting all over my tweezers as well. And once again, I'm going to pull it back and then just apply heat top down. There we go. Okay, so there's another one. And then we've got a little guy sitting down here, once again, absolutely and totally surrounded in plastic, right there. So put that there, and I'll put that there, and then I'll just come at it at an angle down here, just being very careful not to apply any heat to the battery holder. I should also mention that once again it's just a piece of luck really with these old Macs, that they don't have corrosion from battery leakage. This one had a completely and totally dead flat battery, but it hadn't leaked, which is fantastic. The interesting thing about this SE30, whoa, we're about to explode. This does sometimes happen with these capacitors when you apply heat to them. They go poof. And that's what's happening to this one now. Quite stubborn, these ones. I'm having a lot of trouble getting these off, so once again I'm going to just apply heat from the top. There we go, off he comes. And then we've got that wonky one that I was showing you before, which is down below the RAM slots. So I'm going to put a shield there, and then we'll lift that one off. I worked on one of these once, and there was the most incredible corrosion around this one. But this one's really not too bad. So this particular SE30 is in pretty much original condition. It's got the original Quantum 40 meg hard drive in it, and it had 2 megabytes of RAM in it. What an incredible way through a Macintosh SE30 that can be expanded up to 128 megabytes to have only 2 megabytes in it. But it just gives you an idea that this computer would have served its purpose, and then it's probably just been put away and never used again. And that's probably why it's in such good condition. I'd say it's been stored quite well. So last, but definitely not least, are these 3 capacitors along here, which are right next to the plastic connector. I want to take particular care of this plastic connector. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a little bit of what I've got here, Kapton heat-proof tape, Kapton, however it's said, and I'm going to just place that as far down on the board as I can, and just sort of wrap around that there, just give a little bit of extra protection, as well as my metal that I'm going to put on it there. So that's, again, just trying to provide as much shielding as I can for those capacitors. So that's probably all the shielding I'm going to apply. I'm just going to apply the heat from the left hand side there, and then just knock them off one at a time. So let's go start with this one. Melting, melting. Let's see that solder melting. There we go. There's one. On to the next one. This one should come off fairly easily because the board is warmed up. And last one. Get it in view. Off he comes. Okay, there we go. And as you can see, I've made another little solder bead just there, inadvertently. Okay, so let's take the shielding off, and we'll just have a quick look at the plastic. And if you have a look, the plastic is in pretty good condition. It's a little bit hard to see because we're looking straight down, but you can pretty much tell that that plastic is lovely and intact. So I've managed to get all of those capacitors off without damaging any plastic, which is fantastic. Now, the other thing is that, as I say, it has these axial capacitors. Now, when it comes to removing these, what I end up doing is I just get some cutters and I just snip just near the capacitor itself. There's the capacitor taken off, and I've just left myself with 2 sticking out leads here. The leads just sort of poking out from the board, and I'll use those. I'll apply heat to them with my soldering iron, which will melt the solder, and then I can lift them out with a pair of tweezers. So I'm going to do the same with this one, just cutting the horizontals and just leaving the little vertical bits of metal. So if we then have a look at these under the microscope, you can see that's the little bit of vertical poking out. So what I can do is I can get a soldering iron and a pair of tweezers, and what I can do is just apply the heat to this piece of metal like this, and as you can see, it's melting, and then I can lift that out. It's that easy. Then all I'll have to do is clean that solder out of the hole there. Some of these are a little bit harder to get out than others because some of them are the heat dissipates faster, and so it's harder to get the heat right where you want it. But as you can see, this one is being very cooperative, so quite happy about that. The other one here, going to apply some heat to that. This one is not getting hot as fast, so there's obviously, I'm losing a lot of heat. It's absorbing the heat somewhere along the line there. I might need to get a larger, there we go, I can see it starting to melt now. We'll see how we go with that. It's starting to get a bit pliable. And of course, it's what can also be the case is the pin can be bent over on the other side. So what I might do is I might just get this board, flip it over, and just have a look at those pins and just see if they are bent over. So I've got one here. That's it there. It's not too bad. And that's the other there. That's not too bad either. So I am just going to have to persevere. So back there. Might put a little bit of flux on here. What you can, things that you can do is you can apply some new solder to it, which is what I might do here. That can often help, and a little bit of flux. So I'm going to apply some new solder to it. There we go. And get that all nice and hot, and then lift it out. There we go. That one comes out. And let's see how we go with this one. Once again, applying some heat. Oh, look at that big solder bead coming out, and then that comes out. So that's, I think, in my opinion, that's a much easier way of getting those capacitors out. Is just pulling out just that one little pin. So next thing we need to do is clean it all up. We've got to get rid of all this gunk around here, and I'm going to have to inspect some of these traces, which I do suspect are damaged. There's one that is, I'm just going to point at it with my tweezers, and we can follow it along. It's just coming out of here, goes along, black, 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 all the way to there, black. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my trusty scalpel. This is actually a surgical scalpel, and the reason I use these is because they have these curved blades. So you can see it's a curved blade like this, and they're great for scraping. So what I can do is I can just go back to the beginning of this and just have a bit of a scrape and have a look. Okay, well, I can see copper underneath that, so that's a good sign. It's black and it's got some corrosion, but it does appear to be intact copper. Of course, another way of checking would be to just grab my multimeter, but at the end of the day, I do need to do this anyway, because if left, it'll just get worse and worse and worse. And what I like to do is clean it up, and then I'll put a new coating on it. Not doing a very good job of it, I'm afraid. It's not too bad. That's not too bad at all. So that's really good. I'm very pleased about that, to see that copper's intact. All right, so let's begin the cleanup process for these old pads. Now, with that process, the first thing I do is I get some flux. The details of the flux I use are in the comments section, or in the description section. I'm going to put some flux on there, and I'll put it on all of the pads. Like this. This. Okay. Then we add some nice new fresh solder. And let's do that now. Just gonna focus that a little bit. Looks nicer there. Okay, so here's my fresh solder. I'm just going to give it a little bit of rub around there. Rub around there. Nice and crusty. Look how crusty that one is. Crusty. Alright, so now we've got to take that solder off. That's where we will now be removing both my new and the old solder. And with that, I'm going to use some solder wick. I use 2mm wide solder wick. They do have more narrow ones and they have wider ones, but I just like to work with the 2mm. I find it works really well. So start, then just get the wick on there, and that starts soaking up the old solder. And I also use it as almost like a sandpaper, just giving it a gentle rub. On an old computer like this, the rubbing has got to be really gentle, otherwise you will take pads off. So just giving it a gentle rub. There we go, just looking to get all the black stuff off. There we go. Still got some black stuff there. And the same here. There we go. I'm out of view again, sorry. Rub, rub. Rub, rub. So that's a really crusty one. Let's get rid of that. Okay, oh, I'm just going to trim this wick off and do a little bit more just on that spot there. Get all that off. You can see these pads move sometimes when you're doing this, which just shows you how incredibly fragile they are. But having said that, after this cleaning process, I then get a cotton bud or a Q-tip, and I get some isopropyl alcohol and I give that a rub, and you can see that these pads end up coming up really, really well. Lovely and new and sparkly and clean. It's like it's straight out of the factory. There we go. Oh, look at that. Look at that. Lovely. Lovely. Okay, so they're all looking really good. They're now that they're all perfectly clean like that, they will take solder really well, take new solder really well. So that then makes the job of getting the new components on there really easy. As long as your surfaces are all really well prepared, the soldering on of the new components is nice and easy. If you leave them all grubby, it's going to be a nightmare for you trying to get the new components to stay on there. Okay, so this is where I was cleaning that the traces off a little bit, and I'm going to just hit this with a little bit of wick just to clean them up a bit and to tin them so that they're sort of got a bit more protection on them. Let's get a bit more solder. Okay, a little bit of protection on that copper. There we go. Now, I still have that one I was referring to before, which is this one here, which is black. And again, I'm going to just give that a scrape. Make sure we've got copper all the way along. And once again, we look pretty good. Zooming in there, let's see we've got copper all the way along. I mean, it's pretty scungy over here, and it may not hurt to just do a little bit of a trace repair on that one, because that one, I don't know, the more I clean off, the more good copper I expose. So, all right, let's just zoom out again, and once again I get my trusty wick. And we'll just rub over that. There we go. All right. So, just zooming out again. And we have 4 lovely cleaned up pads. And then we've got that one little guy that lives down here on his lonesome. Once again, hit him with some flux. Hit him with some new solder. And there, and then grab the old wick and give it a gentle rub until it's sparkling clean. I have actually done an SE30 where there was so much gunk on the pads that I ended up having to use a scalpel to scrape some of the gunk off. But I was still able to get them looking pretty darn good by the end, and once again all ready for putting new components on. When you are doing this, do be careful if you accidentally scrape off the coating on some of these traces that are right next to the pads. And the reason is that when I put a new capacitor on, I put a tantalum capacitor like this. Now, if you have a look at this, you can see how wide that pin is on this component. Now, if when I was soldering this on, flip him over, if I was soldering him on this way, or if I was soldering on this way, I'd be soldering around with a reverse polarity, which wouldn't be good. But for the purpose of the demonstration, if that part of that pin was touching an exposed trace underneath there, you could create a short and the computer wouldn't work. So if you do happen to expose one of these traces right next to the pad, it would need to be coated, with some what do you call it, solder mask before you put the component on, so you insulate it. Or you'd need to kind of position the component so that the pin's not touching the exposed bit, and then it might look a bit wonky. But anyhow, okay, so we've now done 5, so let's jump across to our 3 in a row here. Again, I'll just put some flux on the pads. Boom, boom, boom. And get some new solder, some fresh solder. Just being very careful in this region, because I don't want to melt that connector with my soldering iron. So I'm just being very careful not to lean over it. You can see all this. See this. This is the stuff that you get off when you're cleaning up these pads. You get this kind of crunchy, crusty gunk. And it's just great to get rid of that, because it just means those pads are in much better condition. So let's get my wick and we'll start the clean up here. Gently rubbing. It's very rewarding when you're doing it with an old computer like this. You can get it looking really sparkly clean again after all this time. This is quite an amazing old one, this SE30. Given the fact that it lived its life at the time, and then probably got replaced by a faster computer at some stage, and then just sat. And now here we are, bringing it back to life again. Cleaning it now with my these 3 capacitors. I mean, often they leak really, really badly, and you just get all sorts of sponge all over these little points along here, these little test points and that, and all these vias. And this one is just quite remarkable. Let's get rid of that big lump of solder there. Once I've finished this will go into an ultrasonic cleaner to get completely cleaned up. So I'm not overly concerned about, little bits of solder ball that might be floating around, because they will all get cleaned up by the ultrasonic cleaner. Another one here. We're nearly done, don't worry. I know how exciting this is, just watching me clean up pads. Bump, bump. Wick. Real routine going on here. Clean up. Clean up. This is another one where you kind of need to be careful about some of these other traces in the close proximity. Okay, we got that. And that. Okay, another cleaned up one. 2 more to go. 2 more to go. Who's counting? Here we go. There's one. Yep. And of course the other thing I need to do is get the solder out of those holes so that I can put new axial capacitors in. This is another one we need to be careful, because we are surrounded by plastic stuff. So we just have to be careful of the angle of the soldering iron to make sure we don't melt anything, So I do not like sending back boards to customers with melted plastic. It's very embarrassing. Okay. Okay, there's that one. God, didn't that one come up well? Like a brand new one. Right, there we go. This is the last one here. Okay. Now, the SE30s sometimes have problems with their power supplies as well. And that's something I'm going to be checking on this one once I've finished this work, to see whether this one might potentially need to have the power supply done as well. I'm not going to do it if I don't think it needs doing. It will need doing one day, but you know, because this is work that I'm doing for a customer, I don't want them to bring the computers to me and then suddenly come back with an absolutely massive bill with all this work that needed doing to their old computers. As much as possible, I want to just do enough to keep them going. Your power supply could easily last for a few more years before it needs to be recapped. So, but I'll just see. I'm going to have to assess that. Okay, so that's all of the capacitors removed and all of the pads all cleaned up. So all I need to do now is just get the solder out of these holes from those axial capacitors, so that I can then put new axial capacitors in their place. So there's one of the holes there. So what I would typically do with this is I'd try and get a little bit of fresh solder into there as well. So yeah, a bit of new solder in there. You can see there's a lot of crunchy old stuff going on there. And I think I might put a bit of flux on there as well. And what I'm hoping to do, and it doesn't always work, but what I'm hoping to do is put some wick on it and then just suck all of the solder out of that hole. So just put that on there. You can see all the solder sucking up like that. You can see it there. And then look at that lovely, beautiful, clean hole ready to go. So if they all go like that, I'll be extremely happy. So once again, we get some flux onto it there. Get some new solder. Make sure we've got a nice big glob of new solder there. Get our wick and put that there, and then suck it up. Suck it up, buttercup. Yeah, look at that. Perfect. Another beautiful hole there. And then on to here. Now, as I said, one of these ones really holds, it dissipates heat incredibly well. It's obviously connected to a large plane of metal somewhere in the board, and probably ground. And as a result, often when I do what I did before with this, it doesn't suck up all the solder. But I'm going to hope for the best anyway. Put it there. Come on, you can do it. You can do it. See, haven't gone all the way. Still got some on the other side, so I might try and attack this from the other side. Let's try here. Some fresh solder, get rid of all that crunchy stuff. Might seem a little bit counterintuitive adding new solder to somewhere where I'm wanting to take it out, but adding that new solder just makes it flow better, and then that can make it a lot easier to get all the solder out. And one more. Okay, that one seems to be sucking up quite well. Yep, and it did. Okay, so I've just got this one here. Now, I'm not going to bore you with the removal process here, getting the solder out, because this can sometimes take me a little while. It sometimes involves me putting a larger tip so that I can get more heat onto it, but I'm not going to bore you with that. Okay, so now that we have all the capacitors removed, the pads cleaned, we are ready for new capacitors to go on. Now this one has 10 47 microfarad 16 volt and one microfarad 50 volts. So it's mainly all the same in the surface mount ones. And I will start with the one little lonesome 1 microfarad 50 volts. I'm just going to grab one of those out of my stocks. 1 microfarad 50 volt. A lot of these Macs all use the same one, so I just keep a big supply of, I think there's about 4 of the main ones, so as long as I've got them in plentiful supply, I'm generally fine for doing any of these old Macs. So let's start with this one. This is the little one. So we'll start off with some flux. Got my tweezers. Now I'm replacing the electrolytics with tantalums. The little stripe is on the positive side. You can see that little guy there. Now, as you can see, the size of this compared to the pads doesn't leave me a whole lot of room for getting solder on either side. So I need to just be very careful with my positioning. Now I get my soldering iron, and I get some solder, and I just melt that onto the tip. Like that. Don't need that much. Then I hold the capacitor in place, allowing space on either side for a bit of solder, an even amount of space on either side, and then apply. There we go. Now you can see that is actually gone right down the side because some of that has been exposed. I'm just going to put some pressure on the top just to make sure it's nice and flat. Melt it again. There we go. Okay, so that's on solid on one side. We can see that. Now I am right-handed, so I hold my soldering iron in my right hand side, in my right hand. So when I want to solder the other side, I flip the board around like that. And once again, just get a little bit of solder onto the end of my soldering iron. Apply some pressure on the top, and then just melt. There we go. Okay, so that's on, and the way I check to see that it's on is I just give it a little nudge with the tweezers, and if there's no bending, then I know he's on well. Okay. Right, so all of the rest of the surface mount are 16 volt 47 microfarad. So I'm going to keep those nearby. I'll just get a little pile of them here. Put a pile just, there we go. I'll need some more, but I won't necessarily go through the process of soldering every single one of these because that might just be a little bit boring. So I'm going to do these 3 here all essentially together at the one time. So I will apply flux to these there and there. Then I will grab my new capacitors. Okay, so I've got my 3 capacitors all now sitting in the spots they want to be, and then I'm just going to solder one side of each one and then flip it over and do the other side. So let's start here, get some solder onto the soldering iron, hold still with the tweezers just like that, and boom, there we go. And then just apply a bit of pressure, hold it in position, there we go. Okay, so there's that one. And then we want to do this one. Once again, soldering on. Hold this with the tweezers. Boom. Trying to get it lined up with the other one as well, because I do like them to all match. And we put some, oh, there we go. Hold it in position. And melt. There we go. Lovely. Third one. You know the routine. Solder. Hold. These larger ones, there's a lot more room on either side, so it's a lot easier for me to get plenty of solder on either side of the capacitor. Now I'm going to flip them around and do the other side of each of these. Solder. There's one. Solder. Here's two. And last of all, some solder. And three. Okay, nice clean joint. So we've now soldered both sides, all three of these, and that one's a tiny bit crooked, but if you don't tell anyone, I won't. Okay, we've got one down here. Once again, just double checking the cheat sheet, but yep, here's a 16 as well. So we get flux, plug him on there. And solder on the tip of the soldering iron, hold them in position, and melt. Holding them down and melt. There we go. And flip them around. Ding dong. Obviously, as you can see, get quicker at this as you go. 3 in a row here. So, flux. Okay, then capacitors. We've got all of the positives pointing across to the right here. As you can see, there's a positive, there's a positive. So, 1, 2, 3. And solder. Position. Here's 1. Solder. Position. Obviously I'm coming at it from this side. I don't want to be leaning over that plastic connector with my soldering iron, so definitely coming at it from this angle. And okay, and then flip around. This one is a little bit crooked. It's a little bit embarrassing. So I wonder if I can just bend that a little bit, just a smidge. Now, because I've got my plastic there, I'm just coming in from the top. As I've said in my other recapping video, if you have an easy side and a difficult side of a capacitor, if it's difficult to access, always do the easy side first and then solder the difficult side second, because you don't have to be worrying about steadying the capacitor when you're doing the second side. So you can worry about sort of angling your soldering iron in a particular way. Okay, so there's that. Alright, so I'm going to just do the remaining 3. I'm not going to include that in the video though. Okay, so that is all of the surface mount capacitors replaced. So we've got our little group of 5 here, we've got our little group of 3 here, we've got one there, we've got one there, and we've got one there. So, last is to replace our axial capacitors. So I've got some axial replacements. Now, this one here on the On the left there, that one is a 470 microfarad 16 volt. Now I've got a 470 microfarad 25 volt. There's no problem with going up with the voltage. You just got to make sure the rating is the same. And there's lots of space here. There was actually room for probably a far larger capacitor at some stage. So there's loads of room to stick this slightly larger capacitor, slightly larger rating capacitor on here. So it's these electrolytic capacitors. The little arrow is pointing to the negative. So I'm going to pop that in there like that. And I will then just, on the other side, just bend these pins a little bit so it doesn't fall out. And then we've got this one here. This one is a 220 microfarad 16 volt, and this is a 220 microfarad 16 volt. Axial capacitors are not commonly used much these days. They're usually through hole. At the moment they're still readily available, but you do wonder whether eventually we won't be able to get them anymore. Whenever I put capacitors on, I always like to put them on so that you can read the details of it for the next person. It just makes life a lot easier. Okay, so I'm just going to bend that pin and bend that pin and put it through the holes there, and again just bending these a little bit so they don't fall out, and then a bit of solder. So I'm just going to move this a little bit. There we go. Okay, so there's one. Let's get some solder, and we will. There we go, there's one. Here's the next one. So this is the one that was really hard to get the solder out of, and as you can see, it's connected to this great big ground plane here, and that's why it was sucking all the heat out. All the heat was getting lost along that. So there we go. That's up in there. And we've got, I'm gonna have to move this again, sorry. Okay. There's that one there. There's solder. There we go, one there. And bang. One there. Okay, so then I just need to trim those pins off. And put them over, make sure they're all looking good. Now, as with every recap that I do, I always like to do a double check. Make sure that everything is on the right way, so making sure that all the polarities are correct, making sure all the capacitor ratings are correct. Looking at here, my positive. It's fairly easy on this one because all the positives are on the left hand side, so if you've got one around the wrong way, it sticks out pretty easily. So and that's basically it for the recap. So the next step now is to get this board, pop it into the ultrasonic cleaner, get it all squeaky clean, and then I will connect it up to the computer and test it and see that it still works. And hopefully what we'll find now is we'll have sound. It's always a possibility that the speaker is blown, but we'll hope for the best at this stage, that the speaker will be okay and we will get sound. Okay, so this SE30 logic board's been recapped and it's been cleaned, and now I've put it back together to test it. Now, it did actually work before, but there was no sound. So the main thing I'm going to be looking out for is a nice loud chime when I switch it on. So I'm about to switch it on now. And there we have a nice loud chime. So the recapping did fix the sound issue, which I did expect it to do. Now I'm booting this up off a SCSI2 SD drive with system 7.1 installed. Just looking at this, I can see there's a little bit of burn-in on the top of this screen, which is not uncommon for a computer of this age. I don't hear any whirring coming from the fan. There was no delay in the startup. There's no flickering on the screen. So I'm not going to do any recapping work on the analog board or the power supply. I think this one's probably fine for now. It'll probably need it in the future, but for now, in the interest of saving my customer a bit of money, I'm not going to recap the analog board as yet. So I think this one is pretty much ready to go. So thanks for watching.